A task force was appointed to determine what to do with the building. Demolition was discussed. A replacement was sought. Ideas for its future were floated. In 1973, the Albuquerque Museum considered but passed on the auditorium as one of 6 possible sites for its new location. Among the problems identified by the task force was its small size. A larger venue would have been more preferred to make it more profitable. Additionally, the dome had been damaged in 1958 by a summer heat wave that melted the tar, leaving a ripple around the edge of the dome. A task force decided that the Civic Auditorium would operate for 5 more years. In 1974, the building and acreage were almost sold to developers for Grand Center, a terraced commercial housing complex that would have kept the auditorium's dome. This model shows how the project was conceived by noted architect Antoine Predock. Regrettably, the contract was voided and lawsuits followed. It was around this time that Pearl interviewed with Edna Hetherington. Their conversation again turned to the Civic Auditorium.
One of the buildings we have to mention in relation to that decade, or to before 1960. I say that decade because my part of it really begins in 1950 and it ends in 1960. The most important and altogether and largely unfortunate thing was the Civic Auditorium.
Why do you say largely unfortunate?
Well, I had the there was no one else around in this. See, Gordon Ferguson organized this firm in about 1936, something like that. And I came here in 1950, and the practice had just expanded a great deal. There were a lot of new people in the office, and big opportunities were coming. And so I was asked to design a Civic Auditorium, and I simply wasn't ready for it, not nearly ready. And I was enthralled by the basic idea, which is pouring a dome on a mound of earth and digging the earth out. And I had no idea of how to handle mechanical equipment. I had no idea how to use glass or how to use brick. Thanks to the engineers, the form of the dome itself is beautiful, but I didn't know. Well, it was a team. It was a big effort. I was just out of school, and I wasn't really enthralled with specifications. I hadn't thought about what surface you put on the roof of a dome. I can justify myself if I had been. I can always explain my part of a situation and come out blameless, you see.
I hope
but,
so.
If I'd had some experienced people to work with and some sympathetic, helpful mechanical engineers and structural engineers, etc., if we'd been a really competent team, we could have pulled it off.
Pearl was only 5 years into his architectural career with Ferguson Stevens when he designed the Albuquerque Civic Auditorium. No project like it had ever before been attempted in Albuquerque. Later, a marine life attraction called Waterworld was proposed for the property.
We just feel that the public needs to know so that they can give feedback to the city and say whether the public wants to see this type of utilization for the building. And at that time, if the city decides to do so, then maybe they'll lease to us.
It failed to make a splash. We can see in this footage that the glass is damaged and the reflecting pool has been replaced by a grassy park. The pool had been installed in 1957 without a drain, and management complained that it became a dirt bowl whenever the wind blew. Swan suggested the pool be filled in less than a month after the auditorium's opening, and later that year, fish were stolen from it. Swan went on the record to say, "I hope this doesn't mean that we can never have anything nice at our auditorium." Near the end of its life, local Shriners also proposed a trade with the city to use the auditorium as their new Fez Club. but in 1980 the building and the land were sold to St. Joseph Hospital for $1.75 million, allowing the city to retain use of the auditorium and its parking for another 5 years, presumably allowing time for the development of new auditorium facilities. In 1979, a plan had been recommended by the city for the sale of 7.6 acres to the hospital to satisfy its parking and expansion needs. The only other proposal for redevelopment at the time had been Waterworld, which failed to meet the needs of stakeholders. An editorial in the Albuquerque Journal on January 11, 1980, opined that Mayor David Rusk should be commended, rather than criticized, for negotiating a sale mutually advantageous for buyer and seller. The City Council's 7-2 vote confirming the transaction serves as a strong vote of agreement. In 1984, Pearl recalled how superbly beautiful the auditorium had been at the time the earth was being pulled out. At the time, the hospital had not yet declared their plans for the auditorium's future. Don Schlegel believed that the auditorium, while designed to do everything, failed to do anything well. Still, he thought it should have been saved. Bob Mallory stated something similar, that the structure tried to do more things than can be expected of any one building, though he disagreed on saving it. Among design decisions he regretted, he recalled that the seating as too steep and close together. I asked if there had been any point where he thought the auditorium could have been saved, and he stated that more thought should have been done on the front end to reconcile the problems it experienced later. But he did fondly recall the exciting method of construction, the anticipation of creating something worthwhile and beautiful. The 5-year reprieve the auditorium had received in 1974 became 12 years, but no more. After rejecting a month-to-month lease on the building, it was decided that the final curtain would fall on the Civic Auditorium on June 30th, 1986. The headline, "Where Can Rock Go?" was printed in the paper after the announcement. Demolition commenced in late September. Remember that wire that wrapped it? Campbell says that clipping it made the demolition team nervous, but nothing came of it. The wrecking ball came down on the dome on October 14th, 1986. The next day, the headline read, "Wreckers Raise Unloved Auditorium." Don Stevens, Ferguson's former partner, publicly lamented the demolition of his firm's work. Pearl, who had privately expressed the satisfaction of having designed such an important civic center, and one that Wright picked to like at that, also privately lamented its destruction. In his writings on file at the Center for Southwest Research, Pearl, who had a passion for preservation, scrawled onto a sheet of paper these poignant thoughts. Do buildings sometimes die? Yes, of course. Like people, buildings live and die, come and go. That's natural. What's perverse is when they, or we, are wasted when we could still be of use. Everything changes. Functions change. Sometimes we have to learn new jobs. When I can no longer be of use to others or to myself, I suppose I will be ready to go, but not before. George Pearl passed away on August 16th, 2003. In a 2002 conversation conducted for the Architectural Heritage of New Mexico Oral History Project, on file at the Center for Southwest Research, Pearl expressed this quiet sentiment. Strange they tore it down. Mo Palmer wrote that the Albuquerque Civic Auditorium landed in the dustbin of history. City resident Joe Sherwood captured this photograph, marking the end of its 29 years. From dust to dust, or a mound of sand to mound of sand, nothing remains on the site. The Heart Hospital now stands where the auditorium once stood. Only this minimalist memorial, designed and installed by landscape architect Jill Brown and dedicated to Martineztown resident Frank Martinez, hints that there was once a looming, saucer-shaped auditorium on the hill. Today, the Albuquerque Civic Auditorium is a much-missed landmark in a city again without an auditorium.